What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here, and this is the Nolecast. We're going live tonight, so I'm going to let a couple people pile in here real fast. I'm going to tweet out the link, and if you are listening on the audio side, go ahead and maybe skip forward. I don't know, 40 seconds, maybe a minute before this really gets in. I don't mind y'all skipping forward. I would do the exact same thing. So, all right, let's tweet this out here. Let's do it live. Answering your Florida State football questions right now. Cool. All right. Looks like we got some folks here in the chat. Kevin A and Laguna A. I'm not going to take a lot of chat questions tonight. We have some pretty cool guests coming up. I don't like taking live questions as much when I'm doing a solo show, simply because I feel like it distracts me from the overall part of the show, and I apologize for that. But I will take a couple, so I'll scroll through them, and I'm not ignoring you. I'm just kind of focusing more on the questions who everybody submitted through the Patreon, and just questions that I've kind of had some time to marinate on today, make some phone calls about, have some discussions about with some folks. So let's just make sure I have all of these highlighted here. And I apologize. This is probably not the best podcasting. I pretty much assure you, though, this is going to be a good show. All right. So with that, I do want to thank all of our sponsors off the top. Of course, the legendary team. Chad does an awesome job. 844 FSU Loan is the number to call. 844 FSU Loan is the number to call. We're closing in on 600 listeners who have joined us in the Nolecast Loans family, and we're really appreciative of that. Obviously, I've done it twice. Personal testimonial. It's an awesome experience. I think Chad's going to bust his butt to get you a great rate, give you an awesome experience, and there's nobody who is more bummed out about this season, who's not on the coaching staff, obviously, than Chad. So always appreciate his support. Matt Lewis as well. I mean, just the group chats that we have with the sponsors right now, I would say are not going well, but these guys bleed it. I mean, it runs Garnet for sure. Of course, Charlie Park, Madison Social, and the whole For the Table group. Matt Thompson does an awesome job with that. If you guys want a great restaurant experience in Tallahassee, that is the spot to hit up. Charlie Park, Madso, Township, they take care of you. It's awesome, and I feel for those guys. Obviously, like if you're in town, make sure you do hit up the sponsors, and you tell them we sent you there. Obviously, they do an awesome job, and they're not turning in one of the worst restaurant seasons of all time. I can tell you that in terms of performance. We hope that people continue to show up. So I combined a couple of these questions simply because I just think they're very related. The first one is DJUWTF, and that's a lot of y'all sent that in. So a couple people had questions about why would you take DJU? Why do you continue to play DJU? All of that kind of stuff. I'll start with the first. For the purpose taken, I actually understand why you would take DJU. It was not a great quarterback market. In my opinion, this was not and clearly is not a roster that you should have been all in with, right? I would define being all in as spending like 20 million on a roster, like Ohio State is reported to have done. I think Miami's probably pretty close to that. Maybe there's one or two other schools out there. If you read the various reporting, I know the Athletic thinks that FSU is somewhere like low single digits or high double digits in terms of ranking, like on an ordinal rank standpoint about where they are NIL wise. So like maybe 8th to 14th, right, in terms of where they are in the country. Certainly a lot more last year when or fewer teams had their NIL act really together, and FSU had a real chance to, in their estimation, win big with a roster, as opposed to, I think I've said this before, the plan, based on what I can interpret, was try to take some multi-year guys who have some value going forward for 25 as well, but also still try to make the playoff. And in my opinion, even though everybody over there continues to deny it, I do think they were influenced by the snub. And I think that there is a chance, maybe it's not quite as high as I believe, but I think there is a non-zero chance that they would have accepted more of a step back year had they actually made the playoff and not been snubbed at 13-0. So when people are like, "Oh, are they still being affected by the snub?" Mentally, I don't think so. Offseason planning wise, I do think that had something to do with it, because I think there was pressure to show everybody, hey, we got to be back, right? Like that. And I just don't know that this is the roster to try to do that with. Although there certainly were some really good pieces on this roster, as I will discuss. So you took DJ in what was a relatively weak quarterback recruiting market. Um, could you gone went and got Cam Ward? The timing was really awkward on that. First, second, are you better with Cam Ward? You would be. Are you going to win the ACC with Cam Ward if the rest of the team plays like this? No, you're not. Like, he's not a 3-win difference on this team. I mean, I think a win and a half would be like exceptionally quite a bit for a quarterback. But I could buy it. Maybe win and a half. Shoot, if you want to say 2, I don't think that's crazy. But you're not going to win the ACC with everything else going on and going wrong with this team right now. But at the time, you were thinking, hey, this is going to be a power run football team with a very veteran offensive line. Got a bunch of questions about that, which I will get to later. But you don't need DJ to throw the ball 30 times a game. It's run, play action, some screen stuff, play action, some deep shots, that type of thing. And if you gave FSU the benefit of hindsight and you said, hey, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen to your offensive line, I think they would be like, oh God, no, we can't take DJU. Not with this set of circumstances. That is not a good fit for this Knowles offense. So why do they continue to play him? I think there's a couple things here. And this is similar to the discussion that we had before Memphis, but it's also different. And I don't like to just repeat myself on this show when I can help. So I do want to just point out why I'm going to do so again. I do think there was an important thing of like, hey, don't start 0-3, and now you have. But like, to me, now you got to realize the season is really over from like a goal standpoint. I don't know that Mike Norvell gets that, right? I think that a lot of these coaches are so locked in. How do we win this week? There's a pretty good chance, not a great chance, but a non-zero chance that DJ gives you the best shot to win this week. He has been better than Brock Glenn in practice. And you may just say, well, shit, that means Brock Glenn sucks, and he definitely won't be the starting quarterback for Florida State next year. That logic is solid. I don't know that I necessarily buy it, because how you play in practice does not always reflect how you play in games. Clearly, like, DJ has not been this bad in practice. He has been this bad in games. But I kind of think like they're going to play the guy who is best. He was atop the depth chart again this Monday, and I don't know about y'all, but my group chat, it lit up like a Christmas tree. And they were like, dude, what the hell? Like, we're not going if FSU runs out DJU. Like, we don't want to watch this. Like, I'm not making, the 3.5 hour drive from Orlando. I'm not making the 4.5 hour drive from Tampa to go and watch any more DJU games in person. We're done. And we know it ain't all on this kid, but he doesn't fit what you do. He clearly looks hurt, actually. My buddies think, and like, based on how slow he's running around, I don't really disagree with that. Although he's not wearing the knee brace in the game, so I don't know there's any actual evidence that he's hurt, other than that if you were to sort of like put side by side the clips of him running at Oregon State, the clips of him running now, he certainly doesn't look like out of shape now compared to Oregon State, but he does look a lot slower. So it does make me question if something has gone on that would make him lose foot speed. Just kind of makes you wonder, right? But that is also crazy logic in that why would you keep playing him if he was hurt? So maybe I don't think he actually is, but there's something where he looks less athletic now. And it might just be because he's thinking more, or because he didn't have to dodge bodies all around him at Oregon State. And Oregon State had a pretty damn good offensive line, and they had really good skill talent as well. So yeah, people don't want to watch this. And I think coaches generally are just going to play the best guy for the most part, and until it gets later in the season. Now, that's a hard mentality to get out of. I do think it's one you need to get out of here. And the reason is, I don't know about y'all, but I mean, I look at Twitter some, but honestly, like the way I use Twitter, I use it with TweetDeck. Like there's a hack you can actually get old school TweetDeck still if you want, and I have all my Twitter lists like from left to right. I have news, American Conference, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, analysis, stats, Conference USA, independents, not including Notre Dame because I put Notre Dame in the ACC, the MAC, Mountain West, SEC, the Sun Belt, and then a couple other like custom searches and stuff for keywords. So I don't really look at like the general feed. I really use Twitter just for info. But if you look at it at all, I mean, you kind of see like people are out on this and they just don't want to watch this. And ultimately, football is an entertainment product. It is your entertainment dollars and your weekend that you're choosing to waste on this team, if you believe it's a waste, driving up to watch DJ play. So I do think somebody needs to get in Mike Norvell's ear and be like, man, this ain't it. Florida State fans don't care about winning this game. Okay. The season, from a wins and losses standpoint, is already over. This is Florida State. You don't care about going 2-10 or 5-7 or 6-6. Florida State fans are not going to give a damn or even show up for some 6-6 bowl game. They don't care about that. The goals are much higher. So do whatever you need to do to potentially give yourself either a reps advantage, an experience advantage, or even an information advantage to know whether or not you need to go get a transfer quarterback in the portal this offseason. And that means don't play DJU anymore. People don't want to see this. I don't want to see this either. And I don't think it matters. And I don't think it really should matter that much if he is the best option in terms of winning this game. Because I don't think winning this game is all that important, okay? You're already having a disaster season. People are like, oh, it could get much worse. I don't think it really can. Not that much worse. People have eyes. They realize this team is not any good. Now, you might win this weekend. I mean, I went and watched San Diego State game this morning for Cover 3, which I really appreciate you guys subscribing over there too. We're almost to 50,000 on that channel, which is pretty nice because, I mean, for the longest time, we kind of got the mushroom treatment on it. You know, we've really built it up ourselves. And San Diego State is getting home on a lot of pressure, just scot-free and blasting this Cal quarterback. And Florida State's D-line played pretty damn well last week. And Auburn's D-line is nowhere close to what FSU's is, even if you think FSU's D-line is a little disappointing this year compared to expectation. Like, you know, it's not playing up to what Pete Thamel tweeted it was going to be. It's not playing up to what Nick Saban said it looked like when he saw them in practice on game day. But it's still better than what Auburn has run out there. And it's definitely better than what San Diego State has. So you're favored for a reason. And the reason is that Cal's offense might be just as bad as yours is. Probably not, but I mean, there's a non-zero chance, right? I think Florida State would score, you know, some points on a San Diego State level team. But I don't think winning this game this weekend truly matters. I think you need to kind of see the bigger picture if you're Mike Norvell, and you need to play somebody who is not DJU this weekend. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I'll scan the chat here a little bit. Cover 3 was much better when I was the only one of my friends know what it was because you're winning your pick 'em pool. That is funny. No, Mike Norvell's not gonna get fired this year, guys. That's silly. Sorry, most of these are just crazy. Do you think Mike doesn't want to bench DJU because of NIL? No, I don't think that has anything to do with it. Do you think it's because he doesn't want to scare off potential transfers? No, I just think that he has been. I think that he believes DJU gives him the best chance to win. And as a coach, it is hard to divorce yourself from that and see bigger picture, like what is the best for the program. I will say in 2006, Georgia ended up playing a guy named Matt Stafford before he was maybe totally ready, and he ended up, you know, being okay. Now, they don't have a Matt Stafford on this roster, I'm pretty sure, but because Matt Stafford's going to be a Hall of Famer, I think, in the NFL. But there are examples of kind of taking your lumps with the younger guy and at least getting him some reps in there. I also don't know that I completely buy the idea that DJU is the best option for Florida State over Brock Glenn right now, given where the health status of the offensive line, right? If you're Norvell, you had to be like, come on, man. Darius Washington gets hurt in warmups? Like, what the hell? I mean, you're already down Byers. You're already basically down Scott. Like, I know he's not like totally out, but he's not healthy enough to be effective. like that's just kind of crippling. So I totally understand why they went conservative game plan, open the game and try to get the ball out quick. But DJ doesn't appear to be better than Glenn at setting protections, at least not based on how many free rushers you have. Doesn't appear to be real quick with adjustments and things. And certainly Glenn has a much better athletic profile than DJ does. So I don't know that I fully accept the idea that Glenn is better than DJ in terms of giving you a chance to win. Or sorry, that DJ is better than Glenn in terms of giving you a chance to win, because however it plays out in practice is certainly not how it is playing out in games. And the whole run around, make something happen out of structure is a plan that coaches hate. But I will say, I do a lot of these observations. Oftentimes, when a coach makes the wrong decision on a quarterback, it is because they did not value the guy whom they did not pick. They did not value his mobility quite as much as they probably should have, because the guy in practice, a little more controlled setting, is better in structure, and the guy that runs around and makes things happen, you just don't get to do that in practice as much. So, yeah, that's kind of my thought on that. I didn't think I was going to go 15 minutes on that, but I did. All right. Cool. Let's go. Question here. Do you think the plan is to start Glenn later in the season for some reason? Or maybe they'll start Glenn this week and not tell anyone this week? That's kind of my thought, actually. The second part. I don't really think there's a great spot in the schedule to just insert him as the starter. You could say like, oh, late in the year, but then you still have the game at the Irish. You still have the game at Miami. So he's going to take some lumps whenever he plays. Maybe there's a shutout or two coming. We'll see. If you were going to start Brock Glenn this weekend, you wouldn't want to give Cal like a week's notice to do it. So I cannot fully dismiss the idea that they're keeping DJ at the top of the depth chart and then playing Brock Glenn as the starter. Like, there's no rule that says the depth chart has to be honest. In fact, Florida State and many schools put out depth charts that are, I don't want to say intentionally misleading, but maybe not like purposefully truthful, if that makes some sense. So, yeah, I could see Brock Glenn. I could see Brock Glenn starting this weekend. I do not think it is a foregone conclusion that DJ is for sure the starter just because some depth chart handed out at the Monday press conference says so. All right. What do you think about Josh Newberg's tweet that Derek Ray will be the downfall of FSU football, and it's gone downhill since he got? Yeah, that was a weird tweet. I don't really. First of all, I don't agree with it actually, and I don't know what the motivation is for that tweet. I could kind of guess at it, but I'm not going to. It seemed a little out of character for Newberg to tweet that, but I'm busy. I've got a family. I haven't had a chance to call on, so I'm not going to be like, oh, here's why I think he tweeted it, because I don't know, so I'm not going to say, because that would be kind of out of character for me to guess at that. I certainly have my guesses. I will say, based on track record, that's insane. You can certainly say that Florida State missed on some of their portal evaluations this cycle. I think that's factual. They did, right? But part of what made that so shocking is that they absolutely lapped the market in portal evaluations for the two prior classes. They were almost without fail, literally. I mean, they didn't go 100%, but they went damn near 100% for like 2 straight years. So if we're going to give the blame to Derek Ray for this portal class, which I don't know, certainly some, yeah, right? Like, if he's the GM, he's in charge of a lot of how the recruiting department is run. But at the same time, you have, I think, a lot of coaches who are pushing to go get guys who they previously had recruited and narrowly missed on out of high school, right? Think about it. Earl Little, Ferguson, a lot of these guys were, Murphy, a lot of these guys are guys that FSU was in on, didn't get, and they trusted their evaluations and the coaches' opinions as well on these dudes coming out of high school. And it looks like in some cases they were wrong about those, especially with the Alabama guys. So, hell, kid from Georgia, right? Jones, certainly worth taking that shot. Athletically, you got to take it. Like, I don't think there is anything wrong with that, what they did there. But they didn't hit this year. But Florida State got a lot better when Ray started running the transfer department, not worse. So I don't really get that assessment at all personally. A couple people asked me would I want Derek Ray's job. Not a chance. So he makes 250, I think, from like the publicly available data. I don't know exactly what he makes, but I think it's about 250. The assistants on this FSU staff who can't recruit for shit make like 750. So I would have to work more hours, take a pay cut, deal with more headaches than I currently do now, and I would have less control over my success in Ray's role than what I do running Nolecast and Cover 3 and working for CBS. No thanks. All right. Now, granted, in some future year, there's probably a GM that makes $1 million, but that's a long way off, I think, from that becoming like the standard amount that a GM would make. He's also been better than me ultimately, I think, at a lot of these portal evaluations that FSU did. Like I had major questions about Johnny Wilson. They took that shot, they hit. I wasn't sure what they're going to get in Trey Benson. I think they did a nice job with their due diligence there. And obviously the guy was he the highest pick running back? Like there's a pretty good number of examples of good evals they've made. But I mean, there's so many guys on this staff that I would have a hard time seeing other elite teams want to hire. And it's mainly because of a lack of effort or a lack of skill or both in recruiting. So if I was like, if they're like, hey, Bud, would you be FSU's GM? I'd be like, do I get control over those guys? Or do I have to depend on Mike Norvell suddenly really caring about recruiting? Because I think all the best recruiting staffs, it comes top down, right? You think Kirby cares about recruiting? Guy recruits his ass off and demands it of his assistant coaches, right? Saban, even when he was retiring, still made, from what I was told, every single in-home visit. I mean, that's just that kind of fanatical players win, not coaches attitude that the best coaches seem to have, like Urban Meyer, right? He told a pretty good story the other day on Big Noon Kickoff. I thought was pretty instructive. At the very highest levels of the sport, it's players, not coaches. He would make the coaches rank who the best athletes were on the team. And then if you were in the top 10 or 11, he said, he would tell the coaches, all right, your job's now to find a way to get those guys the ball. Like whether or not they were the best players, he's like, just don't care. Athletes. And that, which is kind of a crazy way to coach, and it's probably not the optimal way to coach, but it does sort of illustrate the point that the very best coaches in this sport care about getting the most talent at the highest levels. Now, if you're trying to consistently do Iowa, or if you're trying to do Kansas, or like what Doran does at NC State, like have a system, run it, be consistently dependable, etc., that's a little different. But if you want to take home the biggest prize in the sport, you got to get the biggest freaks. So no, I don't. I mean, this was a kind of a funny thread on Noles 24/7, which is an awesome website, and Brennan and Chris and Zach and Dane and all those guys do a nice job with that. I mean, I think it's the best site in the FSU market. But I did think about this question a lot because a couple of my buddies texted me the thread because this guy was suggesting like, hey, Bud should be FSU's GM, and I thought, no, that's nuts. I do not want to be FSU's GM. Like, way more of a headache. I'd have to move. Like I work a pretty crazy number of hours during the season, but in the off season, it's more of a regular. It's not 9 to 5 because you have like travel on the weekends and stuff, and you go to recruiting events and things. But it's like there are weeks in the off season where I'm only working 40 hours. I don't know how many weeks in the off season like a football GM only works 40 hours, especially because you got to deal with all this NIL BS constantly, right? And I think that job has gotten a whole lot tougher. As you lose your first mover advantage. I mean, FSU was way out ahead on some of these things, and the market has caught up to them somewhat to where, like, every year you lose a little bit of your innovation and first mover advantage edge. So, no. Now, if you could guarantee me that Mike Norvell would really, really care about recruiting and would hold his assistant coach's feet to the fire in recruiting, then yeah, I think that'd be a cool job because at that point I'd be like, oh, all right. Maybe what I like if I was a GM, like, what I say matters more. If I was a GM, maybe I can go make 1 million in 5 or 6 years. Like that'd be cool. But for right now, I don't think that job's that great because I don't think the perception of FSU staff from the outside is that the head man really cares about recruiting at the high levels. That's just my opinion, right? I think the perception of FSU is that when they win a big recruitment, they win it because they were the highest spending team. I don't think they win on relationships or hard work compared to other schools. Yeah, everybody has to pay, but I do think that they are having to win on money a lot more often than they do on relationships and things like that. So, um, yeah, no, I'm not saying he doesn't care about recruiting, but I don't think he cares about recruiting on the level like a Kirby Smart. Okay, I think he cares about coaching more, and I think that is a misallocation of caring at the highest level of the sport. That's my opinion. I think there's ample track record of that and evidence of that because of who he's allowed to stay on the staff. You know, I just don't think that the process reflects that kind of care in recruiting. So we will see if it changes. Got a bunch of questions like, is Mike Norvell just Dan Mullen? I mean, he's a lot less goofy, right? And Mullen never had an undefeated season. So I would say no. Obviously, the recruiting stuff that would indicate a little differently. Let me see here. Question: how many staff changes does FSU need to make? Does Norvell have the nuts to? Oh, sorry, I should have read these better. Does Norvell have the guts to make them? I think if you don't make at least 4 assistant coach changes in the offseason, I would have real questions about if you're serious about finding the right balance between recruiting and coaching. And if you can't coach, and I think this year brings some of this into question, whereas the prior years, the guys had done a pretty nice job coaching, even if they were pretty poor recruiters. What would you say you do here? To quote that movie line. So I think 4, like, you need to be over 3.5 here if we're setting an over under here, would be an important step in the right direction to bring in more guys who have some real juice on the recruiting trail. And I mean, Mike's not an idiot. He has to see this. You went 13-0. You sent 1 million guys to the draft, and your staff still couldn't recruit worth a damn. I mean, that hurts your NIL game too, right? Like if you're always having to pay top dollar because you don't have relentless recruiters on staff, money doesn't go quite as far. So I think there's an efficiency question here as well. Like, yes, it'll cost some money to get some new assistants in. Does it save you money in the long run if you're able to win some recruiting battles based on relationships, based on effort? I think so. As to the question of would he actually do it, to me, that is twofold. One, does he recognize there's a problem? 2, does he actually have the stomach for it? He has made very few firings, to my knowledge, and maybe 0 like actual performance-based firings. Obviously, they had a non-coach leave the program, but that was like an HR issue. I think that was way over his head. The DB coach got a gig at Arkansas. The linebacker coach got a gig as the Hokies defensive coordinator. Neither of those were firings, but there were a lot of whispers that a change was going to be made. Maybe it is Norvell's preference that a change is made in that way. But I don't know if some of these guys are going to be able to be, what's the right word here? Not rehomed, but I don't know. You kind of get what I'm getting at, though. But yeah, I do think that they need to make some changes to bring proper balance to the staff between recruiting and coaching. I think it is overweight on the coaching side. And this year you would laugh and say, well, Bud, these guys look like they're coaching like crap. And I get that. But the overall track record is that these guys are probably pretty decent coaches. But their overall track record is also over a very long time. And talking to other staffs, they are not a good recruiting staff, period. Like their NIL game is so much better than their actual like recruiting, relationship building, talking to people, being effective salespeople, putting in that relentless effort game. You can talk to any staff they recruit against. I guarantee you they fear FSU's NIL much more than the actual recruiting efforts of the coaching staff. All right, next question here. Dude, what the hell is with the $2 million defensive line? I got a couple questions about this. People sent me the article from Bruce Feldman at The Athletic. I don't want to insult our Patreon members. If you have questions about a $2 million defensive line, I think you're kind of telling on yourself because you're not realizing what the market was paying this offseason. I'm like very convinced that a $2 million defensive line represents a discount over what FSU's defensive linemen would have received on the open market. You might think that's crazy. I don't. So if we want to talk about like staff decisions with evaluation or allocation of NIL, I think there's room for some criticism of that. In fact, that's the next question. Do you have any criticisms of how they've allocated it? Yeah, actually, I do a little bit. Of course, this is hindsight, right? They very strongly value their culture and the continuity, both on the coaching staff and on the roster. I think they thought it was important to bring back as much as they could from the 13-0 team. If you want to say that they overpaid for some of these guys who aren't any good, I think that's probably fair. Ultimately, at every program, the thumbs up or the thumbs down on that comes from the head man. Not officially, of course, but at any program, there's one guy who's truly in charge of it. It's not a coordinator. It's not a GM. It's not the NIL side. It's the head guy in charge. So is it really hard to blame them though? They had a good culture last year, right? I mean, they had a really nice mix. And this year there's clearly just something off with this team. Norvell talked about it in terms of how much work are you putting in off the field? Like what is your competitive character? Should they have known? Could they have known those things 10 months ago? I don't know that they could have. So in fairness, is it really fair for me to criticize this when I'm second guessing here as opposed to in some cases first guessing? I don't know. And there's things that I have first guessed about this team, kind of shut up about for a little while because I look like a total idiot for about 2 years. And now they've resurfaced. This really isn't one of them. So I don't know. But second guessing, if I'm allowed to do so. Yeah, I do think that they, like the best pro sports teams, they don't pay up for just okay players. They let them walk. And that's hard to do. So maybe that is like the Stars and Scrubs approach is a little better. But I don't know. Like it's also really important to have depth. And ultimately, we're still in the infancy of this thing. All right. I'm scrolling here in the chat. Not much in the chat that we really didn't that I didn't cover. I don't know. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I really thought the questions this week were excellent. Guy Davis says, Bud, as a former career advisor, I say you are thinking the right way. Yeah, I just like to have control of what I do. You know, like I mean, like today we had our cover 3 meeting, right? And we have it like every month. And I just at the top of my sheet, if I own the show, what would I change? Because I think you got to approach things like if you had ownership with it. You know, the second you're just like, whatever, man, I'm getting my paycheck, whether or not this show does well. I think that's when I think that's when you start to slip personally. So yeah. All right. Let's get back into this. I'm not really like I appreciate the chat. You guys make sure you give the thumbs up on the chat. But I'm not really seeing a whole lot of new questions that I either have not answered or don't plan to answer later in the show. All right. Let me see. Does okay, a couple other ones here. All right. Let's get back into this. That's probably bad audio. I apologize. Question. Can you explain what happened to the offensive line? You said it could be a top 10 offensive line. I did. I will wear that. I think it's important to apply some context to that, though, obviously, as you know, as I try to weasel my way out of this. First, I will say that I was trying to say that as people had sent me other clips of other shows from people who cover the team, not in the 24/7 network. I think they're just like social media people or something, and they were saying like this could be the best offensive line in the nation. It's like, guys, if you get a chance to go see other teams practice, like your players don't look like that. Like they don't look like Georgia or LSU or Ohio State. Like they don't physically look like that on the offensive line. Like they're not there yet. So my thought process was, okay, maybe if they stay healthy and they communicate really well and all the veteran experience allows them to operate at a high level, like maybe you could see top 10 because there was a lot of teams out there this year that had pretty extreme offensive line turnover. So saying they could be top 10, I don't think is the same as like guaranteeing they would be top 10. I was trying to draw a distinction from people who were saying like this could be the the best offensive line in the nation, where I just don't think that measures up. But here's the deal. Byers didn't play against Memphis, okay? He got hurt. And he also didn't play against Boston College. He played pretty damn well against Georgia Tech. I don't know where like the social media hate of him came from, but guess what? Y'all saw the last two games. A marked difference when he wasn't out there. Washington gets hurt in warmups for the for the Memphis game. Scott is also hurt. Now, not too hurt to like play at all, but I mean, way too hurt. Just I don't want to call it human damage goods. Like his skill set is really diminished because of all the injuries. Okay. So basically, your top three tackles are unavailable to play or to just play at an acceptable level. And then Harris transferred out because he only had 1 year left to play. And I don't know what he got from TCU. Let's just speculate that like I don't know, maybe TCU, which is probably a top 25 ish, top 30 NIL situation. Like maybe they gave him, I don't know what, quarter million. That seems about right for a starting offensive lineman that's not at like a top 10, top 15 program. I mean, how much would you have had to give that kid to stay and be tackle 4 or tackle 3, assuming that he has eyes and knew Scott couldn't play? Um, like 750, like a million. The guy's got 1 year left of college ball. He wants to play. Like I don't know what the number of dollars it would be, but you're not going to be able to keep a guy like that to be a backup. So uh, you're basically down the top 4 tackles that you had last year at this point, which sucks. Lucas Simmons missed an entire year of practice due to medical issues, so he's basically a year behind. You should be treating this like his true freshman season. You really can't get a tackle to come in to be tackle 4 or tackle 5, not at least not one who is worth playing. A couple of y'all have asked about Armella, like my opinion on that. I mean, he's buried on the depth chart. If he had any practice film that was worth a damn, he would be, I think, transferred to another school because if you can play at all, schools are going to try to pick you off, and guys have their practice film and they can, if they want to, in the offseason, shop it around before they go in the portal. They can give it to their agent. I'm assuming that he either didn't do that, or if he did do that, that nobody wanted to bite on that practice film. And I don't think he's a tackle anyway. And I've said that since signing day, despite another network rating him 5 stars, which didn't make any sense to me because I watched him as a freshman in the all freshman game. And then I also saw him in the prior or in the subsequent years. So no, to me, he's not an option to play tackle. Anyway, things will not get better if you are continuing to run out injured Robert Scott and Jalen Early. Like, they will lose to Cal. They will lose to SMU. They will lose. If that is who you have to play at tackle, they will lose the Cal game, the SMU game, the Clemson game. They could beat Duke with those two in the game. They will lose to Miami. They will lose North Carolina. They'll lose Notre Dame. They'll beat Charleston Southern, and they'll beat Florida if that's who they have to run out. Because Florida does appear to have quit, by the way. I will say that. If you get one of those two guys back, I think you feel quite a bit better. If you get both of them back, that's actually a massive upgrade. You did move the football, not amazingly, but you were not incompetent on offense against Georgia Tech. It wasn't like you had a bunch of short fields caused by turnovers in that game. So that is the only time that you had both those guys together, and that's just not going to work when you don't have those dudes in there. I thought Graham was pretty prescient, actually, if you go to our season preview episode, like the one where we do our predictions. Now, try not to laugh at all this, obviously, because we were quite a bit wrong about some of this stuff. But if you look at it, he did say, like, yeah, you just can't afford any tackle injuries. Because I mean, and I think if you listen to his comments, he's just never been a believer that Scott was going to be able to return to a playable level. Let me see. MAGA Eagles has had our D-line get dominated by BC. Well, BC just double teamed you like crazy, and your linebackers just let them do that with impunity because they didn't fill and they're poorly coached and they're not very talented. So I just think if you are facing FSU's D-line, you basically just need to put all your focus on them. And I don't think that they will act like the linebackers just don't make you pay for the most part. All right. Question. Can you address the lawsuit? Yes, I can, actually. I can say a couple things here. Number one, this is going a lot better for Florida State than I thought. This is my personal opinion based on the court proceedings. But I think the most encouraging thing here, if you're a Noel, is that they're pretty receptive to a lot of the arguments that I think people would have read and be like, sometimes you just plead everything and a lot of stuff's going to get thrown out. Some of the arguments that the court is receptive to have surprised me. So that is an encouraging sign for sure. Let me see. Did Norvell waste the game against Georgia from the standpoint of looking at how their roster looked and moved and the physicality they played with and seeing what he needed to recruit going forward? That's an interesting question. I don't think he wasted it. I mean, that game was pretty well after. I'm trying to recall the timeline here. It was after signing day. So there's not a whole lot you could have done with the signing day. Their high school recruiting this year, for the most part, has been better, especially at some positions. I mean, up until obviously very recently where you lost some ball games. Again, I don't think Norvell is an idiot. I think he's a good football coach. And I don't think he's incompetent. I don't think he's like crazy disorganized or anything to that effect. I think he has a bit of a recruiting blind spot, and we'll see if he fixes that. But he had to have eyes and realize that, like, Georgia's guys don't look like Florida State's guys. They just don't. That's kind of one of the reasons why, if you go back in every episode, I have always taken a very specific and purposeful tone when discussing Norvell and the contract extension and why it made sense for Michael Alford, right? Because if you go 10-2 every year and never win a national title, you're never getting fired. That's a great living. The stands are full at 10-2. You're going to make the college ball playoff a lot at that. But I never was like, yeah, they're pretty close to winning a national title, because I didn't believe that. And I don't believe that with the way they recruit high school. I believe national titles are won through the high school level. Now, you will see maybe Ole Miss breaks that this year. I don't know. But in the back of Norvell's mind, he has to be like, oh, shoot. Like, okay, some of these dudes, they got to do a better job of recruiting for me after playing Georgia. That's sort of my thought. Let me see. Ryan McGuire wants to know why haven't they put Span out there? Guys, Span can't play. Like, he's not a guy that can play for you. Span was a player it made sense to take at the time because your roster was in really bad shape. So you take a gamble on him and you see what he's got. He did have elite speed. We do know that Illinois was pretty pissed to lose him. Hasn't worked out, probably for a lot of the reasons that, probably for a lot of the reasons it didn't work out at Illinois, right? Just some guys can't be receivers. They're just big and fast, but they're not actually skilled. And he's certainly just not skilled at playing receiver. Yeah, I definitely don't think FSU has a money problem in terms of recruiting. I think they have an effort and skill problem. I don't think they work as hard as other programs at recruiting from an assistant coach standpoint. And I don't think their assistant coaches have skill as a recruiter. If you guys are in sales, you know certain people can sell and certain people cannot. And to me, this staff has an imbalance of sales skill. I do not think that they have guys who are personable, who establish meaningful connections with people. I think a lot of times these recruit interviews that you read are lip service because they are from an outlet that is an FSU focused outlet, and they're asking like, "Hey, how's your relationship with this?" And no kid's ever gonna be like, "Oh man, yeah, terrible," right? Like they're always be like, "Hey, they're super nice guys," but the whole like nice guys finish last thing. I would put money pretty far down the list. I mean, if you read the Athletic article, they're what top 8, top 10, top 12 NIL budget in the country. Like that's pretty competitive. Maybe it's not as much as like an Ohio State or a Miami, but they're pretty damn competitive in that standpoint, according to independent sources. Not like, hey, Bud knows Ingram, so he's caping for him. Like you just go read it in the Athletic. So yeah, that is pretty much what do we have? Oh, we had a couple more. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit more. See, I need better congruity with my spreadsheet. Make sure you guys check out Congruity HR Solutions. That's payroll. It's HR. Let's optimize your business. Let's hit up Matt Lewis with Congruity. I think we've had like 10 Nolecast listeners decide to take their business to Matt Lewis, which is awesome. All right. Let's go. Do I think DJ Lundy? I mean, DJ Lundy kind of has to play right now, right? I mean, if you want to say you should just let him stay at Colorado, sure. Like he's nothing special, but your linebacking core is nothing special. So I think you kind of just need to play him. How did Mike Norvell look at the Georgia offensive line and think they were going to be good this year? I think that's an important distinction, Chi-Town Knoll 86, and a good question. I'm glad you asked this. I don't think Mike Norvell ever said anything like this is going to be the best offensive line in the country. Again, I don't think Norvell's an idiot. After playing Georgia, there's no way that you could be a sane person and think that your people look like their people. Their people are just so much bigger and faster and longer and athletic than your people are. But there's just not many people who look like a Georgia or a Texas. They're just not. So it's not crazy to think this could be the best offensive line you had. And I think it would have been easily if they had stayed healthy or like just reasonably healthy. You have much better depth at guard, than you do at tackle. They just happen to, I mean, like their top 3 options at tackle are hurt right now. So that's a problem. So I don't think that Norvell ever embraced that this was the best offensive line in the country narrative. I don't think he ever compared it to Georgia. And clearly he is worthy of some criticism, but let's not make up false narratives that we then criticize people for. I don't think he ever embraced that. He said it would be the best offensive line he's ever had, which I definitely think it would be if your guys were healthy. Like they weren't that bad against Georgia Tech. to me, that was much more quarterback, other positions on the roster. All right. Let me see. Okay. Question from Patreon. Hey, Bud, you previously suggested the ACC schools take a haircut to give more to FSU and Clemson, and they'd still make way more than they would if they had to be in a league without FSU and Clemson. How do you know that? What do schools in other leagues make? So let's take a look at the American Conference per team payout. Okay. So in 2022-23, so this is back when the Americans still had UCF in it and SMU and Cincinnati and Houston. So some of their bigger brands. Let me look here for the 2023. Find this. Sorry for this on-air research. I kind of grabbed this one at the end for you. American Conference. And I'm using the American Conference. All right, so let's just call it 8 because they did lose some of their top brands, but inflation, obviously, they added a few teams. I mean, 8 million is like a small fraction of what ACC teams get, right? Let's look at what was your ACC payout in 24, right? It was, sorry, 43 million last year. So an American Conference school gets like a fifth of what an ACC school gets. To me, like if this is kind of what I had suggested 2 years ago before the lawsuit, I was like, it definitely creates a lot of negative feelings. It creates a lot of problems. Sorry, okay. So Cam Rising is going to play against Oklahoma State. All right. It would create a ton of like discord in the league and some problems if you had your top schools making way more than the bottom schools. We have seen this at times with the old Pac-12 or Pac-10, as I think it was when this practice was in place with USC. And we have seen this as well with the University of Texas back when they were in the Big 12, when they were making more money than everybody else. And they were certainly earning that money, but it was a problem. I mean, people were not happy in those leagues. But if you had Florida State and Clemson leave the league, I do think it would cause a pretty serious haircut, either short term or definitely long term. Like ESPN would look to get back some of that money because you know who earns the real TV ratings in this league. And it is overwhelmingly Florida State and Clemson. So if you're making 43, right, your next kind of closest conference peer, the American, makes 8. Because I don't think most of these schools would consider going to the Sun Belt, like Wake Forest or Virginia or whoever. They would never go to the Sun Belt, right? Assuming that they would break up with the ACC, which is not clear. Probably would not, actually. You could take a 30% haircut, right? Pretty easily and knock yourself down to 30 million, and you're still making like almost 4x what you would make in one of these G5 leagues. I don't know. To me, that always made the most sense. You have a lot of teams in this league that have no hope of actually winning the league and competing in it. They just kind of collect checks. And you have a couple teams that are really, really worried that if they have their act together, which not Florida State this year, clearly, guys, right? But if they do have their act together, that their best isn't good enough because of conference affiliation and the payout, which will be coming in the next couple of years. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I just, maybe it's a pride thing. Maybe it's it's probably we don't want to be the athletic director or the president who signs off on taking, a quarter cut to our athletics budget. It's always better, I think, personally, to just kick the can down the road if you don't have any kind of vested long-term interest in a school. But to me, from like a business standpoint, that always made a little more sense. Let me see here. Who is, in hindsight, should we have gone for Trayshawn? Who is Trayshawn instead of Williams? I don't know who that is. Um, Rodemaker, people ask about Rodemaker. No, go watch Rodemaker play USF at that Southern Miss game. I think that'll tell you really all you need to know. Um, with the House bill and and CFB trending towards making players becoming employees, is the head coach role shifting towards becoming a game day coach? Uh, yeah, but not soon enough, right? Oh, Trayshawn Ward. No, I don't think Trayshawn Ward would make a difference on this team. Either you get your tackles back or you do not get your tackles back. It is for me, a very binary outcome. How do I see the lawsuit wrapping up / realignment if you had to bet on it? Okay. I would say in order of things that I think are most likely or least likely to most likely. I don't think the Big 12 thing has legs at all. I think it was smart to, if you did meet with them, potentially just kind of get a feel for what they would want to pay. But no, to me, everything I've heard, that's a non-starter. I would say there is I don't know, there's a non-zero chance you just totally lose this lawsuit, right? You always have to address that. I think there's a far greater chance that you are either in the Big Ten, independent, or in the ACC with some sort of revised deal for a period not as long as the 2036 ESPN extension, which I do think will happen and will go through. So, people want to know why Toafili isn't running the ball more. Well, probably because your receiving core is not real good, and they're having to use him as a pass catcher. So, I would play Cam Davis over Roydell. I think, by the way, he just has more juice, and I think you want to play the young guy. Would you hire Jimbo to run FSU recruiting? No. I mean, their hit rate at Texas A&M was horrid. So no, I definitely would not. I mean, their hit rate at Texas A&M looks like FSU's hit rate this year, but every year, right? I think that's pretty much it, guys. Right? We've gone for an hour. I really appreciate everybody joining in. We got a fun guest, I think, lined up for this week to do a Cal thing. Not having the woke Campbell guys on, I did get a pretty good chuckle out of that. The Cal Twitter is, I think y'all would like him. Maybe not politically, but Cal has a small, like not a huge fan base, but the couple like Cal diehards I know, and this is kind of cool, are just as diehard as like any SEC fan you would know. There's just maybe like 20 of them. So and they're all on Twitter and they're all really loud. So that's it's just kind of funny. I don't know. I like talking to people who like their football team, which means I guess right now not a lot of FSU fans liking this team. So I think that's it, guys. I appreciate it, and I will join you again for the Cal preview. And I totally understand if you don't watch, if you do not want to watch this game, if FSU runs out DJ, but let's at least watch warm-ups to see who does play. And I get paid to do this, so I'll do the instant reaction as well on Saturday, even if they do run out DJ. And I don't know, I'll try to find something creative to talk about if they do. So with that, I'll see y'all Thursday or Friday for the preview. Take care.